I sat across from Oprah Winfrey on the 17th of January 2013, and I told the truth for the first time in 13 years. Not the whole truth, not immediately. The whole truth came in pieces, extracted by questions that she asked with a patience I had not expected and a precision I had not prepared for. But the essential truth, the one that every journalist, every teammate, every former friend and sponsor and fan had been trying to extract from me for over a decade, came out in that room. Yes, I doped. Every Tour de France, all 7 of them, I had sat in that chair knowing what I was going to say before I said it. What I had not known, what I could not have predicted from the distance of the years of denial that preceded that conversation, was how it would feel to say it. Not relief, not the catharsis that the narrative of confession is supposed to produce. Something more complicated. The specific feeling of understanding for the first time in years what my own voice sounded like when it was telling the truth. I had forgotten what that sounded like. My name is Lance Armstrong. I won the Tour de France 7 consecutive times. I survived testicular cancer that had spread to my brain and lungs and was given less than a 40% chance of survival. I founded the Livestrong Foundation, which raised over $500 million for cancer research and support. I was one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, one of the most trusted, one of the most celebrated, and I lied to everyone for 13 years with a conviction and an aggression that went far beyond simple denial into something that destroyed people who were telling the truth about me and elevated me as the standard of what clean athletic excellence looked like. This is what I finally told the world, and this is what I have never fully stopped living with since. I was diagnosed with testicular cancer in October 1996. I was 25 years old. The doctors told me the cancer had spread to my abdomen, to my lungs, to my brain. The survival statistics attached to that diagnosis were not encouraging. Less than 40%. That number sat in the room after the doctor said it and occupied a space that nothing else could touch for a period of time that I cannot fully describe to someone who has not received a similar diagnosis. What cancer did to me, and I want to be precise about this because the cancer is not an excuse for what followed, but it is the context inside which what followed became possible was remove every consideration except survival. Everything else became secondary to the fact of being alive. The competitive career I had built, the relationships around it, the future I had planned, all of it became irrelevant in the face of a diagnosis that suggested the future might not arrive. I survived. The treatment worked in a way that the statistics had not promised. I came back to cycling, and I came back different from the person who had left, not just physically, though the physical transformation was real and documented, but in the way I processed the relationship between winning and everything else. Before cancer, I was competitive in the way that elite cyclists are competitive. Driven, committed, willing to do what the sport required. After cancer, the competitive drive had been through something that stripped away every consideration that was not directly related to the result. Winning was no longer one of the things I wanted. It was the only thing. The ruthlessness that the illness had produced in relation to survival transferred directly into the ruthlessness with which I approached competition. Ruthless desire to win. Win at all costs. Truly, I told Oprah. Serves me well on the bike, served me well during the disease, but the level that it went to for whatever reason is a flaw. That flaw was already present before the cancer. The cancer did not create it, but it removed every internal mechanism that might have limited it. The doping was not a secret within the team. That is the part the public found most difficult to process when the full story eventually emerged. I did not operate in isolation, making individual decisions that nobody around me was aware of. The United States Postal Service team, the organization that produced 7 Tour de France victories, ran a systematic doping program that the USADA investigation eventually described as the most sophisticated, professionalized in the history of sport. EPO, blood transfusions, testosterone, human growth hormone, administered with the precision of a medical program because it was, in practice, a medical program. I didn't invent the culture, but I didn't try to stop the culture, I told Oprah. And that's my mistake. That was accurate as far as it went. What it did not fully capture was the degree to which I was not simply a participant in a culture that existed independently of me. I was its center. The program existed at the level it existed at because I required it to. Because my commitment to winning at all costs created an environment in which the people around me understood that the costs I was willing to pay did not have a ceiling that the rules established. The teammates who doped alongside me did so in an environment I had created and sustained. The teammates who refused were pushed out, not always explicitly, not always through direct confrontation. The pressure was structural, the expectation was clear, and I maintained that expectation with an aggression that went beyond competitive leadership into something that the people on the receiving end of it experienced as intimidation. I sued people who told the truth about me. I used legal processes and financial resources and public credibility to pursue former teammates and their families who were saying things that were entirely accurate. Betsy Andres sat in a hospital room in 1996 and heard me tell a doctor that I had used performance-enhancing drugs. She spent years being publicly attacked by me and my representatives for telling that story. The story was true, the attacks were wrong, and I pursued them with the same ruthlessness that I brought to everything else. I viewed this situation as one big lie that I repeated a lot of times. I told Oprah, that was the most honest thing I said in 2 hours of television. The USADA investigation concluded in August 2012. The report that followed was over 1,000 pages. It documented the doping program in detail that left no serious interpretive space. Former teammates testified, former staff testified, the physical evidence supported the testimony. The case against me was not close. I had two choices: fight it as I had fought everything that had come before it, or accept it. I chose to accept it, not because fighting was impossible. I had fought things that seemed impossible before and survived them, but because the specific energy that fighting required had finally exceeded what I had available. 13 years of maintaining a lie at the scale I had maintained, it extracts something from a person that the exterior does not show. The outside remained controlled. The inside had been running on empty for longer than I had acknowledged. The stripping of the 7 Tour de France titles was announced in October 2012. The lifetime ban from competitive cycling followed. The sponsors moved quickly. Nike called. It was a $75 million day. Gone, I told Oprah. Anheuser, Bush, Radio Shack, Trek. The commercial structure that had been built around the name Lance Armstrong began dismantling itself in real time. Livestrong was the one that mattered most. Not commercially, personally. The foundation that had raised over $500 million for cancer research, that had given meaning to the comeback and the public identity that followed it, asked me to step down. That was the most humbling moment, I told Oprah. Not the titles, not the sponsors. The foundation that bore the name I had attached to survival and hope and the possibility that cancer did not have to be the final word on a person's story. Being asked to step back from that was the moment the full weight of what I had done arrived in a way that the legal and commercial consequences had not produced. The Oprah interview was my idea, not a condition imposed from outside, not a legal strategy or a public relations calculation, though the people around me had opinions about whether it was wise that I did not fully incorporate into the decision. I wanted to say it out loud, in public, to the specific person whose platform would ensure that the saying of it reached the maximum number of people who had been lied to. Oprah asked me the question that everything else in the interview was built around. Yes or no, in all 7 of your Tour de France victories, did you ever take banned substances or blood dope? Yes, one word. 13 years of public denial concluded in a single syllable. The room was quiet in the way rooms are quiet when something that has been impossible for a long time suddenly becomes actual. What followed across 2 hours of conversation was the most complete public accounting of my career that I had ever provided. The specific substances, the timeline, the team's involvement, the teammates I had pressured, the people I had sued for telling the truth. The specific moment when I had looked at what I was doing and decided to continue doing it. I went and looked up the definition of cheat, I told her, and the definition is to gain an advantage on a rival or foe. I paused. I looked up the definition of cheat and the definition of level playing field, and I didn't view it that way. I'd gone and looked at all the great riders. I looked at all the greatest cyclists in the history of the sport, and they all had doped. That was the rationalization I had used. Not a justification. I was clear in the interview that I was not offering justifications. But the internal logic that had made the choice feel available. A sport that was comprehensively compromised, a field that was not level in the direction the rules described, a decision that felt less like cheating and more like participation in the reality of what the competition actually was. I understood by January 2013 that the rationalization did not hold, that the scale of the field's compromise did not make my own compromise acceptable, that the people who had been racing clean had been doing so in the same environment I had used as my justification for not racing clean, and that they had made a different choice. I deserve it, I told Oprah, referring to everything that had happened. Listen, I deserve it. I am 53 years old, the titles are gone, the lifetime ban remains. The Livestrong Foundation continues its work without my public involvement at the level it once had. What also remains is the cancer survival, the comeback from a diagnosis that the statistics said should have ended the story in 1996. The $500 million raised for research that has contributed to outcomes for people who will never know my name. Those things did not disappear when the titles were stripped. They existed independently of the doping, and they continue to exist independently of everything that followed the confession. What I told Oprah in that room, the thing that the interview captured most honestly, was that I did not know what I had when I had it. The following: the trust, the specific kind of credibility that attaches to a story of survival and return and repeated excellence, and that I had used as cover for 13 years of lying. I didn't know what I had, I told her. I didn't understand the magnitude of that following. I understand it now, in the way that you understand the value of something most completely after you have destroyed it. The lie I told the entire world cost me everything the world had given me: the titles, the sponsors, the foundation, the public identity built on a story that was only partially true. What it did not cost me was the cancer survival, the children. The understanding arrived at too late and through too much damage to the people around me of what winning at all costs actually costs. I lied to the entire world for 13 years. At 53, the only thing I have left that belongs entirely to me is the truth of what I finally said when the lying was finished. And I am still learning what to do with it.